Eleanor woke that morning to a quiet house. The kind of quiet that settles deep in your bones after years of shared living spaces suddenly become yours alone. It had been 4 years since Robert passed, and the world still sometimes felt muted, less vibrant. She was trying, though, truly trying. She'd decided it was time to step gingerly back into the world, not for work. Her days in accounting felt like a lifetime ago, but for something softer, something that might nourish the soul rather than the bank account. She'd signed up to volunteer at the local community center, the one that always smelled faintly of old books, floor polish, and brewed tea. They were preparing for their annual fundraising gala, a flurry of activity that promised distraction from the stillness of her own life. Sorting through donations for the silent auction felt like a manageable first step. It required hands more than a heavy heart. Driving over, a familiar knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. What if she felt awkward? What if she didn't fit in? She hadn't navigated new social waters in years. The center parking lot was already busy, cars pulling in and out. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor smoothed her sensible cardigan and walked towards the entrance. The friendly banner announcing the gala, a splash of color against the gray sky. Inside, the main hall was a cheerful chaos. Tables were being set up, boxes were stacked high, and a dozen or so volunteers bustled about, laughing and chatting. Eleanor checked in at a makeshift desk, where a kind-faced woman named Betty welcomed her with a warm smile and assigned her to the donation sorting team in a side room. The sorting room was quieter, filled with cardboard boxes of various sizes and states of repair. Another volunteer, a younger woman with brightly colored hair, was already there, humming softly as she unpacked china teacups. "Hi, I'm Chloe," she said, offering a paint-stained hand. "Welcome. Grab a box. It's like Christmas morning, but sometimes with really questionable fruitcakes." Eleanor chuckled, feeling a little tension ease. She chose a medium-sized box and knelt down, peeling back the tape. Inside was an eclectic mix, a stack of old records, a knitted scarf that looked unfinished, a small pile of costume jewelry, and tucked at the bottom, beneath a folded linen napkin, a small, plain wooden box. It was roughly the size of her hand, smooth with age, its simple latch slightly worn. Curiosity piqued. Eleanor lifted it out. It wasn't heavy. She undid the latch and carefully opened the lid. Inside, nestled on a faded velvet lining, were several small items: a dried pressed daisy, a smooth gray river stone, a yellowed recipe card with elegant handwriting listing ingredients for something called sunshine cookies, and resting right in the center, a small carved wooden bird. It was tiny, maybe just 3 inches long from beak to tail. Carved from a dark, rich wood, it was incredibly detailed for its size. Each feather was delicately etched. The tiny eyes were dots of focus, and its head was tilted slightly, as if listening. Eleanor picked it up. The wood was cool and smooth under her fingers. There was something about it, a feeling of quiet stillness, but also a lively grace. It felt familiar in a way she couldn't place, stirring a faint, pleasant echo in her memory. "Find anything interesting?" Chloe asked, peering over. Eleanor held out the bird. "Look at this. Isn't it lovely? Such detail." Chloe leaned closer. "Oh, wow, that's really sweet. Someone put a lot of work into that little guy. Probably handmade. Keep it separate. Might fetch a nice bid in the auction." Eleanor set the bird aside, feeling strangely reluctant to part with it. The box held other items, too. A collection of old postcards, a child's drawing, a vintage silver thimble. She sorted them carefully, but her thoughts kept returning to the little wooden bird. Where had it come from? Who had carved it? And why did it feel so personal? As the afternoon wore on, more volunteers arrived. Eleanor worked steadily, her initial anxiety fading as the simple, repetitive task of sorting and cataloging took over. She saw Betty from the front desk directing people, her energy infectious. She also noticed a man working meticulously near the back of the hall, setting up the display tables with almost surgical precision. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with salt and pepper hair and a quiet, focused intensity about him. He didn't chat much with the other volunteers, answering questions politely but keeping to his task. Some volunteers seemed a little wary of him, approaching with hesitant questions. "That's Arthur," Chloe whispered to Eleanor at one point. "He helps out with logistics every year. Brilliant with setting things up, but, well, he keeps to himself. A bit gruff sometimes, they say." Eleanor observed Arthur from across the room. He wasn't unkind, just distant. His face was set in a thoughtful, perhaps even stern expression. He moved with purpose, but there wasn't the same easy warmth that radiated from Betty or Chloe. It made her feel a little less anxious about her own quiet nature. It seemed not everyone here was an extrovert. Days turned into a week. Eleanor found a comfortable rhythm at the community center. She enjoyed the quiet company, the shared purpose, the small victories of finding something lovely or useful in a box of forgotten things. She still helped with sorting, but also assisted with tagging items and arranging the display tables. Arthur was always there, working diligently, his initial reserve slowly seeming less like gruffness and more like profound concentration. One afternoon, Eleanor was carefully arranging a collection of antique teacups on a shelf. The little wooden bird was sitting on the edge of the table nearby. She'd kept it separate, feeling a strange protectiveness over it. It was small, but it felt significant. As she reached for another teacup, her elbow bumped the table, and the bird tottered precariously. Quick as a flash, Arthur stepped forward, his hand reaching out to steady it. "Careful," he said, his voice low. He picked up the bird, holding it gently in his palm. His fingers traced the delicate curves, his expression softening in a way Eleanor hadn't seen before. "Oh, thank you," Eleanor said, relieved. "I didn't want it to fall." Arthur didn't respond immediately. He just stared at the bird in his hand, a faraway look in his eyes. "This," he began, his voice slightly rougher now, tinged with something Eleanor couldn't quite identify. Longing. Pain. Where did you find this?" Eleanor explained about the donation box. "It was inside a small wooden box, with a few other bits and pieces. It just caught my eye." Arthur's grip on the bird tightened slightly. "I haven't seen a carving like this in a long time." He looked up at Eleanor, his reserved facade cracking just a little. "I had one once, given to me by someone." "Oh," Eleanor prompted gently. She felt a flicker of that earlier feeling of familiarity, stronger now. Arthur hesitated, looking back down at the bird. He seemed to be wrestling with something internal. The cheerful hubbub of the community center faded into the background as Eleanor waited patiently. "It was years ago," Arthur finally said, his voice quiet. "I was in a bad place. Lost. Didn't see the point in much of anything. I used to sit by the old oak tree in the park, near the pond. Just sat there, day after day." He paused, a deep sigh escaping him. "One afternoon, a woman sat on the bench nearby. She had a kind face. She was carving something small from a piece of wood." Eleanor's heart gave a strange little lurch. Carving? By the park pond? "We didn't talk much at first," Arthur continued, seemingly lost in the memory. "Just sat in silence for a while. Then she finished what she was working on. It was a little bird just like this one." He held up the carving from the box, comparing it in his mind to the one from his memory. She just held it out to me. Didn't say much. Something about finding beauty in small things, even when the world feels gray. And then she just got up and left. Didn't ask my name. Didn't preach. Didn't try to fix me. Just gave me the bird." He looked at the carving again, his expression full of a profound, almost painful tenderness. "I kept it. Carried it with me everywhere. It was the only thing that felt real, felt hopeful for a long time. It was such a small thing, but that simple act of kindness, from a complete stranger who asked for nothing. It was like a tiny crack appeared in the darkness I was in. A tiny crack of light. It started everything for me. Helped me find my way back." He finally looked directly at Eleanor, his eyes unexpectedly bright. "That little bird, it saved my life, I think, in its own quiet way." Eleanor was trembling slightly. Her mind was racing, connecting the dots. The quiet woman, the park bench, the carving. It felt too familiar, too specific. "Arthur," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "The woman, What did she look like? Can you describe her? Arthur thought for a moment. She had warm eyes and gentle hands. She wore simple clothes, and she had this way about her, a quiet strength, peaceful, like she saw the world clearly, the good and the bad, and still chose kindness. Eleanor's vision blurred with tears. It had to be. Did she, did she have dark hair, maybe starting to show a little gray at the temples, and a smile that didn't quite reach her mouth but lit up her eyes? Arthur nodded slowly, his brow furrowed in surprise. Yes, exactly. How did you know? Eleanor reached out, her hand covering his where he held the little bird. Tears streamed down her face now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of astonishment, of connection, of overwhelming, bittersweet joy. Arthur, she whispered, her voice trembling. The woman who gave you that bird. She was my mother. Arthur stared at her, stunned into silence. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He looked from her face to the little bird in his hand, then back to her. Disbelief warred with a dawning, profound realization. Your mother? He finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor nodded, tears still falling, a smile breaking through. Margaret. Her name was Margaret. She loved to carve. Little birds mostly. It was her quiet hobby. Not many people knew about it, just family really. Arthur sank slowly onto a nearby chair, still clutching the bird. Margaret, he repeated the name, as if tasting it for the first time in years. Margaret, she was like an angel to me. I never knew her name, never saw her again after that day, but I never ever forgot her. Eleanor knelt beside him, her heart overflowing. She never forgot people either. She had a gift for seeing who needed a quiet moment, a little light. She paused, remembering her mother's gentle nature, her often unseen acts of compassion. She passed away some years ago. It was sudden. I'm so sorry, Arthur said, his own eyes now glistening. I owe her so much. That little bird, that day, it was the turning point for me. It made me want to be better, to find a way to offer a little light myself wherever I could. He gestured around the busy hall. That's why I volunteer here. It feels like carrying on something she started, helping in quiet ways. Eleanor reached out and gently took the wooden bird from his hand. She held it between both her palms, feeling the weight of its simple form, now magnified by the incredible story it held. She would be so incredibly happy to know that, Arthur, to know that her simple kindness had such a profound impact, that it helped you find your light, and that you're now sharing it here. They sat in silence for a moment, the space between them filled with the unspoken legacy of a woman who had quietly changed a life with a carved bird and a few kind words. Eleanor thought of her mother, gone but clearly not forgotten, her influence rippling outwards years later in the most unexpected ways. Arthur looked at Eleanor, a deep sense of gratitude settling in his eyes. He hadn't just received a gift from a stranger. He had received it from the mother of this kind woman who had stumbled upon the very object that symbolized his transformation. The gruffness Eleanor had initially perceived in Arthur was gone, replaced by a vulnerability that was deeply moving. He wasn't difficult. He was a man who carried a profound private gratitude that had shaped his entire later life. As other volunteers drifted into the sorting room, needing space or asking questions, the moment of quiet intimacy faded. But something fundamental had shifted. Eleanor and Arthur had found each other across the years, linked by a small wooden bird and the enduring power of simple, unexpected kindness. Eleanor placed the bird carefully back in the small wooden box. This shouldn't be auctioned, she said softly. It belongs with you, Arthur. It's your treasure. And perhaps it can be a reminder for both of us. Arthur nodded, accepting the box with reverence. A reminder, he echoed, of Margaret, and how much light one person can bring, even without knowing it. Over the next few days, as the community center prepared for the gala, Eleanor and Arthur often found themselves working together. The initial reserve was gone, replaced by a comfortable shared understanding. They talked about Margaret, Eleanor sharing warm memories of her mother's quiet strength and quirky habits, Arthur expressing his deep, wordless gratitude for the moment that had changed his trajectory. Eleanor felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. Her grief for Robert was still present, a quiet ache, but it was no longer the dominant feeling. Discovering the tangible impact of her mother's life, seeing how her kindness had flowered in Arthur's transformed spirit, and his dedication to helping others, filled Eleanor with a renewed sense of purpose. Her mother's light hadn't been extinguished. It had simply been shared, carried forward by others. And now Eleanor felt ready to carry a little more of that light herself. On the night of the gala, the community center was transformed. Lights twinkled, music played softly, and laughter echoed through the hall. Eleanor, feeling surprisingly confident, mingled with other volunteers and guests. She saw Arthur across the room, looking less formal than usual, actually talking and even smiling genuinely with some of the regular center patrons. The little wooden box wasn't visible, but Eleanor knew it was likely nearby, a silent, cherished reminder. Later, as the evening wound down, Arthur found Eleanor near the silent auction tables. "Eleanor," he said, his voice softer than before, "thank you for finding this, for connecting me again." "Thank you, Arthur," Eleanor replied, a lump in her throat. "Thank you for showing me that Mom's kindness is still out there, making a difference. It means the world to me." He smiled, a true, heartfelt smile that transformed his face. "It wasn't just kindness, Eleanor. It was hope. And sometimes that's the greatest gift of all." Eleanor felt a profound sense of closure, but also a sense of new beginnings. She had come to the community center seeking a distraction from her quiet grief, hoping to find a small place in the world again. Instead, she had found a living connection to the past, a reminder of the enduring power of love and kindness, and a surprising new friendship with a man whose life had been quietly touched by her mother's gentle hand. The journey back into the world hadn't been easy, marked by anxiety and uncertainty, but it had led her here, to this unexpected, beautiful revelation. She looked around the room at the faces of people brought together by shared purpose, and knew she wasn't lost anymore. She was part of something, connected not just to the past through her mother's legacy, but also to the present and the future, ready to offer her own quiet light to the world, one small, heartfelt step at a time. The little wooden bird, now safely with Arthur, was a symbol of that truth, that even the smallest act of kindness could carve a path to hope, transforming lives in ways we might never imagine. And that, Eleanor realized with a full heart, was a legacy worth carrying forward,